welcome to today's episode of Compliance Deconstructed, brought to you by the fabulous Jessica Zeff, if I do say so by myself, and also the fabulous Lorie Davis and Elvan Baker. And my goodness, we have had our cup of coffee. Just want to let you know, Elvan's got her Turkish coffee and she is raring to go. Righty ho. So today we're going to be talking about building a compliance culture and why this is so important. I know that a lot of organizations take this idea for granted, or they kind of poo-poo it and they go, compliance culture. What is that? And, that's not really important. We've got these other goals and objectives. Actually, compliance really needs to be part of your organization. It needs to be a discussion. It needs to be in a code of conduct. It really defines how your organization is going to operate and the ethics and the values that you're expecting your organization to abide by. And it gives you a framework. So, and especially if you're working in the regulatory space, this thing we call compliance culture will help you make sure that you're meeting regulatory expectations. Right. So what does that all mean? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. There's something about building a compliance culture, and then there's something about then maintaining that culture. Mm-hmm. And they're both equally challenging. But, just to get started, how do you begin to build this kind of compliance culture? It's not necessarily something that just exists. When you start an organization or you're building your organization, you've got to be quite thoughtful about how you build, just like any other aspect of your organizational culture. Mm-hmm. You build it, it's intentional, or you don't, and it just develops. Well, if you want a compliance culture, you've got to put thought into it. It's got to be intentional. It won't just happen magically.
And I think a part of the problem and I apologize for cutting you off, but I keep thinking, how do you create the culture? Like you said, how do you maintain it? What are the mandatory parts that need to be in that little soup to make it taste good and palatable and makes people want to come back to it? I've seen many companies where people think, okay, they create a code of conduct, code of ethics. Good enough. It's not
We've
good
got
enough.
the paper.
We've got the paper. If somebody were to come, I have a good sentence to show, and I put it at the top of the beginning of the handbook. Hey, I got everybody to sign this at the orientation.
I know, and that's the last time anyone ever sees the code of conduct.
That's very true.
So, but how do you do it? Like, that's the thing. And we were talking yesterday or the other day as we were prepping, like, how do you set the tone of your organization? And there's an element about, well, first of all, understanding the business that you're getting into. Mm-hmm. You're in the healthcare space. We do healthcare, right? You're in the healthcare space. So what does compliance look like for healthcare? What is compliance? And first of all, understanding there's the 7 elements. There's the U.S. sentencing guidelines. There's there's the Department of Justice. There's the Office of the Inspector General. Well, what are their expectations? And really educating the leadership about what this thing is called compliance. And then when we were talking the other day, Elvan, you mentioned about, having the right leadership and the right people in the right seats. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what you meant?
Absolutely, because I think, obviously, because this is a question of culture, it needs to have the elements from the bottom up and the top down. But if we're going to start the conversation from a top down point, you cannot have any type of a culture of the company, but especially compliance culture, unless your leaders are saying it, living it, breathing it, showing it, mentoring it, exemplifying it, and so on and so forth. So when a lot of companies look for different skills when they're hiring for those top seats, right? And they're so very important. And we do need those experience and skills because they're going to lead people's lives. And ultimately, it's going to affect patient care. Great. But I want companies to also pay attention to these individuals, professionals, ideas of compliance. I almost want big or small, I almost want the companies to use the word compliance or ask this in their interview process. What does compliance mean to you? Put them on a video record and go back and watch it of the interview and see what their reaction is. If when you say compliance, they get all defensive, their body language tells you that this is a very uncomfortable conversation to them. They don't like it. They see it as a restrictive, something negative. I really would think twice about having that person on that seat, because they're going to lead people and those people will make healthcare decisions ultimately.
Yes.
So I think that's a part of it. So you need leaders in the right seats who believe in compliance, to whom being compliant comes natural. That it's not a check mark to them, that's a part of their decision-making process, that's a part of their checks and balances system, mentally, internally, not because a job pays them. Because ultimately, all of those things, when they move on from a company, from a title, from a job, you want to see the right people in the right seats who still behave in the way that provides compliance.
So how many have either of you been in an interview? I know I have, where you mention compliance and you ask someone, "Hey, well, what's compliance? What does that mean to you?" And they go, "Oh, that's just following the rules."
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been in that situation? Because maybe they don't even really know. But what do you do with that?
I
Yeah, go
definitely
ahead.
have heard some variation on that theme where they're like, yeah, we just have a bunch of policies, we're good. And they don't pull the thread and realize that compliance is everybody's job. It's you want to see it in your senior leadership. You want to see it in the individual managers, but you also need to see it in the employees. And it's more than just policies. Yes, it's the code of conduct, but it's training and educating people on what compliance is. And it's on compliance and the leaders across the organization to educate folks. When we say compliance, it's more than just policies and procedures. It's when you send us an inquiry, if there's a problem and we have to issue a corrective action, it's auditing, whether it be an internal audit or an external audit. All those 7 elements suddenly become living and breathing, and you really need it to reinforce it. But I think training is a big part of it, but it's also communicating with those leaders. Hey, leader, what's keeping you up at night? There's this big scary bill that's coming, or this big scary audit in your mind. What's keeping you up at night? What when you think about it? Is it privacy issues? Is it data, cybersecurity related? What is it? It's that risk assessment too, that helps you plan. And then from compliance, it's our work plan. It's our audit plan. It's our report out to the audit committee, the compliance committee, the board. It's the report out to talk about it. It's those, Elvan, when we talked on Monday, it was that report out of metrics. Hey, this is how we're doing. Green, yellow, amber, red, this is how we're doing. So it's all of that.
The top and the bottom. This is not one of those situations where there's a train and there's one conductor responsible moving it forward. No, this is not one of those. This is a rowing competition where every hand matters.
That's an excellent analogy.
The front matters, the back matters, and when one is out of sync, it's going to you're gonna be left behind as a company. So yes, I agree with what Lorie's saying. Is a top and a bottom, and it's an everyday thing. It's not just a check mark. It's just how you make decisions, how you naturally make decisions. What's your initial reaction to a problem? Is it to hide it? Or is it to open it up to really solve your problems?
And I like that. And that opens up so many different conversations. And I have had a lot of organizations and a lot of people say, oh, compliance is for the compliance department, or that's for you. That's okay. And I'll look at them and go, no, hold on. No, wait a minute. And that'll lead us on to another topic in just a moment. But I'd like to explore a little bit more, I was going to say, we're talking about compliance and what it means, right? And this compliance culture. And you've made some really good points about compliance being everyone's responsibility and about the leadership and about everyone working in concert and a set of values. But I'd even roll it back just a little bit more. To me, compliance is also about understanding things like your contract obligations. What's in your contract? That's compliance. If you don't know what your contract says, how can you possibly be compliant with it? It's about knowing, if you're going to apply for something, what does that application require? And I'm purposely keeping this broad because I'm trying to show our listeners actually compliance is really just about every day. We already do compliance in our personal lives and our professional lives, whether you work in the compliance space or not. You are already doing compliance. You want a driver's license. Okay, well, you've got to abide by the rules. You're doing it. You've got to take a test. You've got to do practice. You've got to whatever.
You use the checkout
Whatever.
at the grocery store instead of walking away.
There you go. That's right. You don't steal the food. This is all compliance. So when I think about compliance, even in our professional lives, it comes down to almost the everyday things. You sign a contract, you're a vendor for a contractor. Did you look at the contract? If you're in the Medicaid or Medicare space, do you understand the rules? Because from my perspective, a lot of my clients don't. They're too busy. They're doing their clinical work. They're happy to be doing that. And they actually don't understand the requirements. Or you get bigger organizations, health plans, physician practices, and they're focused on other things. Well, know your contract. Just start there. Understand what that says. That goes back to educating and understanding. That's already a compliance culture by saying, hey, look, we need to understand what's expected of us. And then we'll go on to figure out, how we expect ourselves to deliver that. So
Absolutely.
To me, compliance is much more basic than what we've even been talking about. And we do compliance all the time. And can you imagine a business that operates and runs without knowing what it's supposed to be delivering? So to me, compliance is that fundamental. It is part of your operations. It's not something that's separate. How can you offer a service when you don't really know what you're supposed to offer? And without going through a compliance process and saying, okay, what are we supposed to offer? Are we offering it? How do we know we're offering it? Do we have training on how to offer it? Do we have our policies and procedures on how to offer it so that we're all doing it? And then are we measuring that we're offering it in the way that we intend to? Are we looking at any risks? What will get in the way of us delivering this contract? What are the problems? Well, we only get paid if we deliver what we said we were going to do. So what's going to get in the way of our getting paid? That's risk management. So, and I'm only mentioning that to kind of make it more obvious to our listeners. You do this thing we call compliance, right? The compliance we're talking about just sets a framework or a structure around things that we already do. And we get spooked by this thing called compliance. And actually, I think it's the language sometimes.
Yeah. The other thing, Jess, I wanted to pull the thread on what you had said about risk management. Sometimes it's just laying out the risks. Hey, here's this thing, and here's what could go wrong if we don't do this thing. Or if we do this thing, here's the risks. And compliance, it's not always our job to make the final decision. It's ultimately leadership and the business area, but they need to understand the risks and what could happen. Hey, we could be fined, we could be sanctioned, we could have our enrollment suspended, or whatever the consequence is, but make them aware so that they're fully going in, making a decision with all the facts.
And that's another really great point. And I know organizations and departments and colleagues, they get a little frustrated sometimes with compliance in the same way they do with the legal team. We're not there, though. Legal and compliance, we're two different teams, but we kind of work in a very similar way sometimes. And one of the things we don't do is tell you what to do. We can advise you. We can give you the risks. We can talk through the benefits. Obviously, we're a strategic partner, right? So we can do all of that. But ultimately, operations and the other leaders of the organization have to be able to prioritize and say, okay, well, do we want to take this risk or do we not? And that's part of a compliance culture, when you can have those conversations about risk or think about, well, are there alternatives? Part of having a strong compliance culture is about being able to talk about the hard things, right? And the hard decisions and the difficult trade-offs, right? There's no such thing as a perfect situation or a perfect organization. No one has unlimited resources or abilities, and the world's not perfect.
No.
So there are always going to be trade-offs and difficult conversations. But part of that culture is knowing that you can have those difficult conversations, accepting that you will have to make trade-offs. You will have to analyze risk, and that's okay. And sometimes, guess what? You're going to accept those risks, but it's going to be an informed acceptance. It's not going to be, you adopt the strategy in complete ignorance of particular issues that may get in your way. And I think
Absolutely.
that's a much healthier position to be in.
Yeah.
And transparency, I think you touched on something very valuable here. I think when people think about compliance and compliance culture, again, there's just this quite negative, scary, dark cloud that surrounds the subject. And it's okay to say we don't know. It's okay to say we didn't know when it happened. It's okay to say we're improving. It's okay to say we want to improve. It's okay to say we see the fault lines. We see our Achilles tendon. But I think there's just so much negative cloud around it, is that people think of compliance cultures that we create this pretty little box, we put a bow on it in case somebody asks. Compliance is not about that. Your compliance culture is not about that. It's about transparency. And we go back to it. It's about leaders to be able to go back to the field and say, hey guys, here's the last quarter's compliance report to you guys. We have succeeded in XYZ. We fell short of our own expectations on these. We fell short on these ones from the regulators' expectations. And here's our plan. And we need every single one of you to believe in us improving it, to actually improve it. So I used to think that when I lived in a better cloud, before I knew better,
You were more naive, is what you're saying?
Oh, I'm not sure if I ever had that moment in my life. But yes, I think experiences and knowledge skews your point of view. But I used to think that compliance is doing the right thing, doing the right thing when nobody's looking, doing the right thing. But it really isn't. It really, really, really isn't. It's doing the right thing given the circumstances, within the guidelines, within the constraints, within your company's needs and wants, and whomever you're servicing, those people's needs and wants. So compliance cannot just be this ideal that you're either doing it the right way or you're not doing it the right way. And those who are not doing it the right way, you're bad. It's not. It's a very, very fluid concept. And I think that's something that we need to accept to create a good compliance culture, is that this is fluid. Workforce is changing, the population we're serving is changing, the leadership is changing, the regulation is changing. So the ideal needs to be changing, and we need to be adjusting to have a moving, breathing culture.
And I'd add to that, I'd say for me, it's really important that compliance, part of my compliance culture, I like to foster this idea of learning, going back to, it's not one thing or the other. It's not, hey, you're either doing it great and perfectly or it's awful and a disaster. So compliance can be used to highlight what's being done really well, what's really working, and how you can use this compliance framework to further your business or even achieve your or exceed your particular business objectives. But I also think you can use compliance to learn. There's this idea of non-retaliation. And personally, I think it's my management style. I like to
Mhm.
teach, I like to coach. I think that we're always learning,
Mhm.
right? And I
Absolutely.
think compliance, this thing we call compliance, gives that ability for people to learn, right? Okay, so you had an audit, it didn't go so well. All right,
What's
okay,
next?
it happens. So what do you do with it? How do you respond? What do you learn from it? Okay, so it doesn't have to necessarily be a disaster. I mean, I'm saying that with a little bit of, maybe naivety, but some audits maybe are a disaster. It's true. But still, what do you learn from that as an organization, as a
Yeah.
team?
Yeah, Jess, I think that's a great point, and it's all in how you frame it. So when you get those recommendations or corrective actions or requests for improvement or whatever verbiage they use, those are learning opportunities to get it right, to do better, to improve. Hey, you're not best in class, but here's an area they want us to improve. What aren't we doing? What are we missing? And asking those thoughtful questions. Now, obviously, business owners who sit in an audit are doing this typically off the side of their desk while trying to do their day job. So they don't always want to hear that when you show up and say, hey, we got a corrective action. We need to improve this thing. But what a great opportunity. I always see corrective actions as problems you didn't know you have, but great opportunities to improve. And I think it comes down to framing. If you show up and you're like, hey, you got a cap, fix it.
I know,
That's not going to sit great when you're
not
trying to
helpful.
build a relationship with those business owners and stakeholders and have an appreciation that they're doing their day job. And audits, yes, are technically part of their day job, but that's a lot of time away from members or patients or
Mhm.
whatever it is that they're trying to do. So I always think about that. So for me, it really does come down to how you frame it.
I think
And
that's the
also,
difference, how you highlighted the difference between you have a corrective action, you got to do it, and everybody's huffing and puffing through it and rolling their eyes and being annoyed at it, bickering, over the coffee pot. That's a check mark versus, hey, yes, we failed at X, and every time we correct something, it's going to improve some other human's experience within the healthcare space. That's culture. Check mark, culture.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
if you think about it, just to pull that audit thread again, I know I've said that 3 times already, but when you talk about it, you're getting audit feedback, and sometimes you're saying, "Hey, you partially met, you're almost there, and you've got it." So I think
yeah,
that's also part of the framing that you need to have. Hey, we're almost there versus guys. We didn't even scratch the surface on this. But I do think it comes down to how your culture is and building those relationships with stakeholders. I talk about this a lot and I'm really passionate about it. You don't want them diving under the desk when they see you. And if you're waving your audit report at them and saying, hey, you got a cap, go fix it, they're not going to want to talk to you versus, hey, gang,
no.
we do need to talk about this. Appreciate you're busy. Here's our timeline that we need to get a response back to the regulator. Let's talk about this. Who all
Mhm.
do we need at the table? Who else? It's not all you. Typically, it's not all in one business area. They need to bring others to the table to help them solve it. And I think it's that collaboration and cooperation that really will help.
Is this another good moment for me to put my plug in of call me before I call you?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Sorry,
Yes.
Jessica. I don't think you get to talk on this
No, I
podcast.
love
I
it.
think it's me and
Oh,
Lorie. It's like, I'm just every time I
No.
see you open your mouth and I'm like, hold up, hold up, hold up. I got to put my plug in.
no, but I'm really fascinated by this. So I've worked in organizations, and I'll tell you, I won't do it again. Where compliance, was about telling
Yeah.
people how awful they were,
Yeah.
and what they weren't doing. I just don't operate that way. I've never operated that way. It's my particular leadership or management style. I really am interested in this aspect of learning and doing better, bringing people with you. And I felt that in those organizations, the folks that were compliance officers really didn't understand compliance themselves. And it really upset me. It upset me because I felt that they were giving compliance a really bad name. That's not how I see compliance. I feel like compliance, you bring everyone with you. And also, if it's always bad, who's going to come and talk to you? And that's exactly what I've seen.
Yeah.
If your compliance folks and your compliance officer are unapproachable, and you know that anytime you come to them to speak, you're going to be criticized or there's going to be some fallout, no one's going to ever come and speak. They're not going to
Is that
speak up.
why I
And
don't
I've
have
seen
any
that.
friends?
Is that why you don't have any friends? I think you're approachable. What are you kidding? She
But
doesn't
this brings
bite
up another
folks.
great point. A while back, I posted something on one of the platforms that we all use, but it said something to the effect of compliance is friendly to everyone. We don't have to be friends with everyone, but we need to be friendly to everyone. We need to be approachable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really important. How can you do your job as a
Yeah.
compliance officer if people will not speak with you?
The other thing I think and back to my collaboration is there's organizations where there's a compliance entity that, sits separate, but then there's compliance folks in the business that are considered to manage compliance for that particular area. And I think it's all about how you partner with those folks as well. So, hey, I know and I'll pick on clinical just because you're sitting here, Elvan, the clinical compliance person. But I'm responsible for all the compliance. So I want you to make sure you understand how this impacts you in clinical management or utilization management or appeals and grievance. I want you to understand this, and then please take that back to your business areas and let's do some documentation that education took place so that when the regulator shows up and says, "Hey, did you really train people on this?" You can pull out your attestation and say, "Here you go. We
Well,
did it.
yes, I did.
The proof is in the pudding." And I think that is something that we need to think about. But sometimes you're that compliance person and you're it. You are the compliance department for the entire organization. You are a compliance department of one, and you're trying to do it all. You still have to build a culture, but you have to lean more on your leadership. You have to influence them. Maybe, you don't have a fancy title, but you still need to influence them that compliance needs to be sticky. It needs to be tacky. It needs to be ingrained in everything they do, because it will significantly impact the output and how you're perceived in the market, not only by competitors, regulators, but also by your customers or your clients or your patients or your members. Or again, I use lots of phrases because everybody calls them something different, but that matters. Do you really want to be the one that gets the Google review? Yeah, I think they're shady. I think they're sketchy. They're sus. They're whatever, right? And we've read that. We've seen it.
Yeah.
You don't, if you're the compliance person and you're reading that on Glassdoor or Google or whatever entity, you have a problem, and you need to start talking to people.
So another aspect, what I think we're all kind of skirting around is this idea of partnership.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I know we've said the word collaboration, but I'd like to explore that a little bit more, this concept of partnership. So again, going back to this idea of, compliance doesn't just sit with your compliance officer or your compliance analyst, like whatever their job title is. They don't do compliance for everybody. It's a team sport, really. And when you have a compliance, whether you're a compliance department of one or a compliance department of 20, It really doesn't matter. Those partnerships within the organization are really important to building a good compliance culture. So what does that mean? And how do you go about building those partnerships? And, what values or traits? So when we were prepping for this, some of the things that I felt were really important in my experience were being honest, being transparent, being authentic. You're not talking down to your colleagues. Your colleagues. You're all working for the same organization. Talk to them, be realistic, but learn about their part of the business.
Exactly.
Deliver. When you say you're going to do something,
Mhm.
deliver,
Sure.
help them problem solve. When you get that audit, like a lot of audits, when there's something flagging up is not quite meeting standards or policies or regulations, sometimes there's some process improvement that's involved. Well, help them identify it. You probably, as a compliance professional, from your perspective, you might even see it. Have that honest conversation, show the value, but be a good partner. At the end of the day, you're working for the same organization. You're working towards the same goals, values, and objectives. It's okay to work with your colleagues and say, you know what? Let me help you problem solve. Let me help you, let's think about a plan together.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, I think
that's
you touched on
okay.
something very, very valuable, Jessica. I think this is hey, compliance professionals and our listeners who are compliance professionals, take note. A part of creating the compliance culture, it's not also just be approachable, but be approachable in a manner that when you give them a rule to follow and they clearly are not able to follow it, and you find that in the audit, or you find that ahead of time because you get pushback, ask them why and problem solve along with them. I think you touched on something
Yes.
super valuable. I think when we tell people you can't do it, but I'm not able to explain why you cannot do it, and I'm not able to offer a single bit of an advice or a brainstorming session as to how we're going to figure out to accomplish it, I'm not seeing the value of that compliance professional in my lifetime,
Right.
because you just became a checkmark person. Yet again, instead of a culture person, you became a checkmark person who said, no, you can't do it. I understand there are many things in our compliance worlds and regulation that you either can or cannot do. That's fine. There's a certain amount of it, but there's also a certain amount of ambiguity and fluidity within the changing environment of healthcare that requires us to think on our feet, to be problem solvers, to be critical thinkers, and to be partners, to say, okay, I understand this is what the regulation says. This is our business model. And hey, clinician, or hey, business owner, this is your day to day. And now I need to figure out a way to mesh all of those three together so that people can continue to get the care that they need and our business can accomplish what it needs to accomplish. But you also are a successful part of that implementation.
The other thing is, though, is you have to be visible and you have to be present and you have to be available.
Mhm.
If I'm the compliance person, I
Mhm.
want you to know I'm the compliance officer, but I want you to see me and talk to me on a recurring basis.
Mhm.
I don't want to be the compliance person that only shows up once a year for risk assessment and anytime there's an audit. How
Come
likely
see
are
me in my
you
office. I
but how
never leave the
likely
office.
yeah, I'm always here. It's 10 o'clock. I'm still working. But but how likely is that business owner really going to be to tell me there's an issue or a problem if the only time they see me is when things aren't great?
Yeah,
I
they
want to
won't.
be that person that shows up and says, "Hey, I hear you're doing a new implementation. Tell me about that. Hey, I hear, this is going great. I want to hear about your success." It goes back just to what you were saying, to learn the business, but learn what they're doing. Be interested. I will tell you, I was embedded with a bunch of business areas and I wanted to understand what they did so that I could speak their lingo, use their acronyms. When somebody says MTM to me, that can mean a lot of things, but if I'm talking to my pharmacy friends, that typically means medication therapy management versus if I'm talking to Jess and that means, some sort of other acronym. So I think it's really understanding your business owners, but being visible, being present, being available. That to me is all part of building a great culture for compliance, because you're not just there when things are bad or showing up waving your CAP document at them.
It's one of my favorite things about working in the healthcare compliance space. Honestly, I am very curious. I think that I look around and I think, oh my God, my colleagues are doing all this amazing work. And I literally think of the folks around me as my colleagues. Like, I don't
Mhm.
think of myself as, oh, I work in the compliance department. I'm at the top of my white tower. In fact, I really hate when people, have that ideology, because it's just not true. I don't think that's the way compliance should be perceived. I genuinely think that's wrong. And I love going and learning more about what my colleagues are doing. And my perception is, well, can I help? There's an aspect of really respecting the work that my colleagues do, understanding they've got limited resources and they're focused. Their activities and their work is focused in a certain direction. Well, what can I do to help? Well, if I understand what's going on and I understand what you were saying, Lorie, about the language and how they operate, and maybe that will help me understand some of their challenges and some of their risks, so that if there is an audit or there is an issue, it doesn't even have to be an audit. Maybe someone calls the hotline, or maybe they're struggling with the
Mhm.
particular process, like nothing's even wrong. Like
Mhm.
maybe they're totally compliant, but the process for getting compliant is a manual workaround that's costing them so much time and effort. It's
Mhm.
inefficient. Well, maybe if I understand how they're operating and I understand what's going on, maybe I could make a recommendation, or maybe I can bring them together with another team. Like maybe, I can act literally as a strategic partner.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I feel that I'm helping my colleagues. If I'm doing something to make their lives just a little bit easier, just a little bit, give them a little bit more resource or time to focus their energies where they need to focus them, I feel I've kind of done my job, and I genuinely love that. I love that aspect. But
Mhm.
it does require time and effort and a willingness to go speak to people, ask for permission. Can I attend a team meeting, or can I attend one of your training sessions? And you can't be afraid to do that. The worst anyone's going to say is no. And they rarely do. If you express an interest and it's genuine, like, people often be like, "Oh my god, you really care about my part of the business? Like, that's so amazing. Yes, of
Mhm.
course, we'd be really pleased." And it's another opportunity to show that you value your colleagues. You want to talk about this thing called compliance, but you're not gonna beat someone over the head with it. You want to use it to help.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my take on it. This idea we call partnership, and it's one of my favorite topics. And again, coming back to, you can't do compliance alone.
No.
So how do you strategically do compliance? How do you strategically build this culture? Well, you lean on other people in the organization. As always, you've got your compliance committee. This is true. You've got your board. This is true. You've got your leadership. This is true. But most of the organization is made up of everyone else. So you're leaning on everyone else because we all have to do this thing. And I
Absolutely.
don't know. I think sometimes that's the best bit, talking to people, understanding what their challenges are and what gets in the way. And I think the three of us, what we have in common is that we are very present. We enjoy
Mhm.
working with people. I'd say if you don't
Mhm.
like working with people, this isn't the role for you.
Mm.
You've got to design a culture. Culture is very people oriented.
Mhm.
And if you don't like working with people, you're going to struggle. I don't. And
Mhm.
you might not be setting the right tone
Mhm.
for culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Anyone
agreed.
else? Anything else we want to say? Oops, we're getting to 40 minutes.
No, I think we've captured a lot of things. I'm always interested to hear what our listeners do to build their compliance
Mhm.
culture. How do they set the tone? How do they make themselves sticky
Mhm.
and indispensable to their business owners? I think that's the one thing I'm always curious about.
And
Yeah.
it sometimes varies from one organization to another. And it's amazing to hear stories, not just from compliance professionals, but from people who, they've been part of an organization that changed that perception of compliance. I like to talk to people as well who go, oh, yeah, I did work with compliance. And this was how I felt about it, good or bad.
Mhm.
Because if it's a negative experience, I'm kind of heartbroken because I think that's such a missed opportunity. But I'd
Yes.
like to learn from that as well. Like, what happened there that I won't want to repeat? I don't want to repeat that. But equally, if someone's had a really great experience, I'd like to learn from that too. Well, what made it a great experience? That's so awesome. So yeah, a lot of learning. All right, ladies, any
Right.
last words on compliance culture?
I don't think so.
No, I think people should go try it and see what works, see what doesn't work, be flexible themselves, and make it fluid. Things
Yep.
change. People change.
Like a menu of different options.
That's right. Compliance.
Just
on the cart.
remember, I would say that just for our listeners as we close, compliance culture is not what maybe you've grown up to think it is. It's not just about following these rules. It is so much more dynamic.
Mhm.
And this thing we call compliance is very much tied to your operations. If you want your operations to be successful, I don't understand how you get away from compliance. It is just so fundamental to everything we do in our personal and our professional
Mhm.
lives, and we don't even always realize it. When we talk about this thing called compliance, what we're doing is kind of admitting, actually, there's a framework, right? And maybe there are other ways of managing this framework or looking at it or using it. It's very intentional, right? A lot of the times we do compliance, we don't even know we're doing it. But when we talk about a compliance framework and the 7 elements, then that approach just becomes very intentional. And you can leverage it. You can use it to your advantage. And that's why I say it's tied to your operations, and it can be advantageous to really develop a compliance culture where people know, okay, here are our obligations, here are the objectives. How are we going to achieve them? How will we evaluate them? Do we have staff trained so that we can achieve our objectives? And do we have, policies and procedures so that when staff come and go, they can refer to these policies and procedures and everyone knows what they need to do. And that helps our business continuity as well. So I'll end on that note. Thank you, ladies, for a really wonderful conversation. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And we'll see you next time.
See
Thank
you
you for
later.
listening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Have a good one.
ladies. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.